My boss's son fired me to streamline operations, convinced an app could replace my decade of experience. He didn't realize my personal code kept his airline flying. So, I walked out, the system purged my access, and I watched his inheritance crumble from a bar stool. This is where the turbulence truly begins, and trust me, you won't want to miss the crash landing. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Have you ever had a boss who thought they knew your job better than you did? Let us know in the comments. Do you want to know what the heartbeat of a mid-sized airline looks like? It doesn't look like those smiling flight attendants with the terrifyingly perfect teeth you see on the billboards along the highway. It doesn't look like the shiny, polished fuselage of a Boeing 737 sitting on the tarmac like a golden calf waiting for worship. No, the heartbeat of this industry looks like a windowless bunker in Queens that smells like burnt popcorn, high-stakes anxiety, and the distinct, metallic tang of a nervous breakdown waiting to happen. It looks like me, Nicole, staring at a wall of 24 distinct monitors at 4:00 a.m., nursing a cup of coffee that tastes like it was brewed in an ashtray, praying that the de-icing trucks in Minneapolis actually show up before the FAA decides to audit me with a microscope. For 11 years, I have been the operations lead for Air Regional. That is a fancy corporate title for professional chaos manager. My job is deceptively simple to describe, but agonizing to execute. I take the logistical nightmare of flying metal tubes full of entitled tourists and stressed business travelers across the country, and I make sure they don't crash into each other or get stuck in a holding pattern over O'Hare until they run out of fuel and hope. I am the invisible hand. I am the reason your luggage actually makes it to Denver, even if your spirit died somewhere over Nebraska. The system we use is called Airlink. It sounds futuristic, right? Like something a tech billionaire would tweet about. In reality, Airlink is a patchwork monstrosity of code written in the late 90s by a guy named Dave who probably passed away at his keyboard decades ago. It is held together by digital duct tape, prayers, and a series of legacy overrides that and only I know how to navigate. It is a temperamental beast. You treat it right, you feed it the right data codes, and it hums. You look at it sideways, or God forbid, you try to optimize it without asking permission, and it will ground a fleet faster than a pilot failing a medical exam. This particular Tuesday started like every other Tuesday for the last decade, but the air felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with the incoming storm front. I sat down at my station, the command throne, which is actually just a Herman Miller chair with a broken lumbar support I salvaged from HR 3 years ago. "Morning, sunshine," grunted Mike, my shift supervisor. Mike is a heavy-set man who looks like a thumb with a mustache. He was eating a breakfast burrito that smelled aggressively of onions. "Don't start with me, Mike," I said, logging in. The screen flickered green, casting a sickly glow over my face. My reflection in the monitor looked back at me, bags under my eyes big enough to check without a fee, hair pulled back in a bun so tight it was practically a facelift. "How's the eastern seaboard looking?" "Messy," Mike mumbled, spraying crumbs. "Stormfront in the Carolinas. Boston is already delaying ground crews, and we've got a warning light on the routing server. It's the Tuesday update lag." "I'll bypass the handshake protocol," I said, cracking my knuckles. "Just keep the crews on standby." I typed fast. My fingers knew the keyboard better than they knew the touch of another human being. That's sad, isn't it? That's the life. You trade intimacy for uptime. You trade your youth for a pension that probably won't exist when you get there. Within 10 minutes, I had rerouted 3 flights out of Charlotte, bribed a gate agent in New York with a promise of overtime approval, and manually patched the server lag before the automated system could trigger a fleet-wide panic. The warning light blinked off. Green, beautiful, soothing green. I was feeling good. I was feeling like a god of logistics. I had my lukewarm sludge coffee. I had my green screens. I had the illusion of control. But as they say, the illusion of control is usually shattered by someone with a teeth-whitening addiction and an MBA they bought online. At 3:00 p.m., the summons arrived. It wasn't a phone call. It was a calendar notification that popped up on my screen, overriding my weather radar. Meeting, HR and strategy review. Location, the Fishbowl Boardroom A. Time, now. My stomach dropped. It was the same feeling you get when you hear a weird grinding noise in your car's transmission miles from civilly. Zation, I looked at Mike. He stopped chewing his burrito. That feels ominous, Mike said softly. Yeah, I said, standing up and smoothing my polyester company polo. Mike, if the routing server asks for a level 5 handshake tonight, don't force it. Just let it cycle. You going somewhere? Just a meeting, I lied. Hold down the fort. I walked to the elevator. My heart was pounding, a heavy, dull thud against my ribs. It wasn't fear of the work. I could do the work in my sleep. It was the fear of the people who didn't understand the work. I walked into Boardroom A at 3:05 p.m. sharp. The room was mostly glass, overlooking the hangar. It was a cruel architectural joke. The suits could look down at the mechanics busting their knuckles and sweating grease while sipping their sparkling water. It was like a zoo exhibit for the working class. Blake was sitting at the head of the table. Blake is the owner's son. He is 32, has the jawline of a superhero, and the business acumen of a ham sandwich. He spent the last 5 years on a spiritual sabbatical in Bali. Now he was back, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent, holding a title that meant nothing, Chief Strategy Officer. Clinging to his arm like a barnacle with a blowout was Courtney. Courtney was a lot. She was a former lifestyle influencer turned operations enthusiast. She had eyes that were empty inside but surrounded by perfect lashes, and she was holding a tablet like it was the 10 Commandments. Nicole, Blake boomed, flashing a smile that was all veneers and no warmth. Just the lady we wanted to see. Blake, I said, remaining standing. To what do I owe the pleasure? The coffee machine in the break room is broken again if that's what you're looking for. Oh no, we're not here for coffee, Courtney chimed in. Her voice was high, airy, like she was talking to a toddler or a golden retriever. We're here to pivot. Pivot? I asked, my voice flat. We've been reviewing the structural changes for the ops department, Blake said, his voice dropping an octave to sound serious. With Courtney's new insights, we feel that the airline is too reactive. Ops is always putting out fires. We want to be proactive. We want to use AI to predict the fires before they happen. That's called weather forecasting, I said. We already do that. It's on Channel 4. Blake's smile faltered. Funny, Nicole, but we're talking about structural productivity. We feel that your traditional approach isn't aligning with the agile, future-forward vision we have for the brand. We need energy. We need fresh eyes. We need synergy. Synergy, I repeated, tasting the bile in my throat. Is that the corporate word for firing the only person who knows how the server works? Courtney pointed a manicured finger at me. See? That negativity. It's toxic, Nicole. We're building a family here. You're acting like a mechanic. I am a mechanic, I snapped, my patience snapping like a brittle twig. I fix the things you break, but please go on, fire me, say the words, don't hide behind synergy. Be a big boy, Blake. Blake stood up, his face reddening. You are terminated, effective immediately, for insubordination and failure to adapt to new company protocols. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It was a diagnosis of irrelevance. After 11 years of missed Christmases, skipped Thanksgiving dinners, and sleeping on a cot in the office during blizzards, this was my reward. Linda from HR, who had been trying to blend into the beige wallpaper in the corner, finally moved. She slid a thick folder across the mahogany table toward me. She looked like she wanted to dive into a volcano rather than be part of this meeting. We've prepared a severance package, Linda whispered, her voice trembling. 2 weeks' pay, Standard NDA. If you sign now, we won't contest your unemployment claim. 2 weeks. 11 years of keeping their planes in the sky. 11 years of holding the literal lives of thousands of passengers in my hands every single night. And they offered me 2 weeks. It was insulting. It was perfect. I didn't look at the folder. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my ID badge. The plastic was cracked, the lanyard frayed. It had my face on it from a decade ago, looking hopeful, eager. I didn't recognize that girl anymore. I tossed the badge onto the desk. It landed with a sharp plastic clack right on top of Courtney's iPad. "Keep the money," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I don't want your severance, and I'm certainly not signing your NDA." "You have to sign," Blake said, looking confused. "Everyone signs." "Not me," I replied. "Because if I sign that, I can't consult, and you are going to need a consultant very, very soon." Blake laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You think we can't run this place without you? We have the dashboard. We have the D." "Ate." I looked at him. I looked deep into his empty, trust fund eyes. "Blake, you have a dashboard that displays data I curate. You have a system that runs on logic I wrote. You think you bought a self-driving car. You didn't. You bought a stick shift from the 1990s, and you just fired the driver while doing 80 miles per hour on the highway." I turned to the door. "Wait," Courtney said, her voice sharp. "You need to hand over your passwords." "They're in the drawer," I lied. "Written on a sticky note, just like you like it." I opened the glass door. The hallway air felt cooler, cleaner. I stopped and looked back one last time. They looked like children playing house in a burning building. "Hey, Blake." "What?" he snarled, adjusting his silk tie. "The server creates a temporary cache for the flight roster every 4 hours," I said. "It's due to refresh at 3:30. That's in 20 minutes. When the cache clears, it looks for an active user authorization to rebuild the bridge to the mainframe. If it doesn't find one, well, it gets confused." "We have it under control," Blake scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Get out, and don't expect a reference." "Tell your dad I said good luck," I said. I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and descended. As the doors closed, burying me in the silence of the elevator shaft, I pulled out my personal phone. I opened the admin app for the server, the backdoor I had installed to monitor the system from home on weekends. Status connected, user admin Vance, action logout. A prompt popped up on the screen, bright red warning text against a black background. "Warning, logging out will terminate active session scripts and purge personal user directories. Are you sure?" I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the yes button. This is what they didn't understand. Over the years, I had written about 4,000 lines of custom script to keep Airlink functional. These weren't official company updates. The archaic system didn't even know about half of them. They were patches, workarounds, band-aids made of code. For example, when the crew roster system crashes, which it does every Thursday, my script automatically pulls the backup data from payroll so we don't lose the pilot assignments. Without that script, the system just displays error 4004, pilot not found, and the planes sit there until someone manually calls 300 pilots. I didn't delete the scripts. That would be illegal. That would be sabotage. I am not a criminal. I am a professional. However, I had centralized them. I moved all my custom operational protocols into a single, encrypted user directory on the local server. My user directory, the one tied to my active employee credentials. The logic was sound. These are my personal productivity tools. If I am employed, they run. If I am not employed, well, access is revoked. Security protocol, right? You can't have former employees accessing the system. But I needed one more thing to make this bulletproof: a paper trail. A cover-your-ass document so thick it could stop a bullet. Years ago, I had dug up an old compliance agreement from 2014. It was a dusty PDF regarding intellectual property of custom tools. It basically said that any code written by an employee, specifically for personal workflow optimization, remained the responsibility of that employee to maintain, unless formally transferred to it with a 60-day review period. It was a loophole meant to stop programmers from claiming ownership of the company website, but the wording was vague. Personal workflow optimization. My scripts were personal, they optimized my workflow. I had printed it out. I had signed it. I had buried it in a stack of hiring, onboarding documents I sent to HR for the new interns last week. Nobody reads that garbage. It was filed away in the basement of bureaucracy, a ticking time bomb of legal liability. I thought about the 2-week severance. I thought about Courtney's vibe shift. I thought about old man Henderson letting his idiot son play God with my life. I pressed yes. Status disconnected, session terminated, user directory purged. I walked out of the building and into the blinding sunlight of the parking lot. The air smelled like jet fuel and freedom, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. Gravity doesn't care about your job title, and neither does the server. To understand why this betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut, you have to understand the history. You have to understand old man Henderson. Henderson was a dinosaur. He was a man who built this airline with a single Piper Cub and a lot of questionable loans in the 1970s. He shouted, he drank scotch at 10:00 a.m., and he smoked cigars in his office despite the fire alarms. But he respected the hustle. He respected the grit. When I started here 11 years ago, I was a terrified junior dispatcher. During Y first week, a blizzard hit Chicago. The entire system went down. I stayed for 48 hours straight, manually routing planes using a whiteboard and a stack of post-it notes. When the storm cleared, Henderson walked into the ops center. He didn't say a word. He just walked up to my desk, dropped a bottle of expensive whiskey on my keyboard, and said, You're the lead now. That was the handshake deal. I kept his planes flying, and he kept the corporate wolves off my back. For a decade, it worked. But then Henderson got old. He got tired. He started spending more time at his condo in Boca Raton and less time in Queens. And into that vacuum stepped the bacteria that infects every successful company eventually, the second generation. Blake had never worked a day in his life. He had gone to boarding schools, then a private college where he majored in business ethics, which is ironic considering he has neither. When he returned from Bali 6 months ago, we all knew trouble was coming. But we didn't expect Courtney. Courtney was the catalyst. She wasn't just Blake's fiancée, she was his muse. She walked into the ops center on her first day wearing open-toed sandals, a safety violation, and crinkled her nose at the smell of the place. It's so beige, she had said, looking around at the nerve center of a multi-million-dollar corporation as if it were a bathroom she was planning to remodel. It's an industrial bunker, Courtney, I had said, not looking up from my screens. We don't need color, we need focus. But the energy is stagnant, she insisted, waving her hand through the air as if wafting away a bad smell. How can you expect innovation in a space that feels like a prison? From that day on, the improvements began. They weren't improvements. They were sabotages disguised as modernization. They fired Jerry, the maintenance scheduler. Jerry had a limp and a bad attitude, but he could juggle parts inventory in his head better than any computer. They replaced him with a generic scheduling bot that immediately ordered 400 airplane toilets and 0 brake pads. They cut the night shift at the help desk. Nobody flies at 3:00 a.m., Blake argued during a budget meeting. Except for the cargo haulers that make up 30% of our revenue, you absolute walnut, I had countered. Blake had just glared at me. Watch your tone, Nicole. We're pivoting to a consumer-first model. I watched it all happen. I tried to fight. I sent emails. I printed reports. I highlighted the catastrophic risks in bright yellow marker. I practically screamed that the Airlink system was a house of cards and I was the only one holding the glue. Response from Blake: thanks for the feedback, Nicole. Let's stay positive and trust the process. That smiley face, that passive-aggressive, soulless : It was the digital equivalent of spitting in my face. They looked at me, a 45-year-old woman in a polyester polo smelling like stale coffee, and they saw a relic. They saw a glitch in their sleek, modern matrix. They hated that I knew where the bodies were buried. They hated that they needed me. So they decided they didn't. But now, as I stood in the parking lot, I realized they had made a fatal calculation error. They assumed that because I was a worker, I was powerless. They assumed that because they held the titles, they held the control. They didn't understand that in the world of logistics, titles mean nothing. Access is everything. And they had just revoked the access of the only person who knew the password. I checked my watch, 3:20 p.m. The first bank of flights, the Friday rush, was scheduled to push back from the gates at 4:30 p.m. Timing is everything in aviation. If the system crashed now, it wouldn't just be a delay. It would be a domino effect. One flight misses its slot, the gate isn't cleared. The incoming plane has nowhere to park. The passengers on the incoming plane are stuck on the tarmac. The flight crew times out because of union rules. The replacement crew is stuck in traffic because the crew scheduling system is down. It creates a knot so tight that Alexander the Great couldn't cut it. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan with high mileage, much like its owner. I didn't go home. I wasn't ready to go home. I needed a front row seat. There's a bar about a mile from the airport called The Final Approach. It's the kind of place where the floor is sticky, the lighting is non-existent, and the bartender, a guy named Sal, knows your drink before you sit down. It's a sanctuary for pilots who have timed out, flight attendants with sore feet, and ground crew who just need to forget the last 8 hours. I walked in at 3:30 p.m. The place was empty, save for a couple of baggage handlers in the corner arguing about sports. "Early day, Nick?" Sal asked, wiping a glass with a rag that was arguably dirtier than the glass. "Permanent vacation, Sal," I sigh. D sliding onto a stool. "Give me a grandiose amount of tequila, the cheap stuff. I want to feel it burn." Sal poured, I drank. I propped my phone up against the napkin holder. I didn't have access to the internal system anymore, but I had something better, FlightAware, the public tracking app. I watched the little yellow plane icons moving across the map like ants. 3:31 p.m. The cache refresh. Somewhere in the server room, a line of code was reaching out for my digital hand and grasping nothing but air. In my mind, I could see the ops center. Mike would be finishing his burrito. The vibe shift dashboard on the big screen would be displaying all green lights. Then, the first glitch would happen. It wouldn't be big, just a flicker. Maybe flight 4002 to Miami would suddenly show a departure time of null. Mike would frown, he'd tap his keyboard. "Hey Tyler, Miami just dropped its tag, probably just a sensor." Tyler, the 22-year-old intern Blake hired because he understood the algo, would look up from his phone. "Refresh it." Mike would refresh, and when he did, the system would look for the backup script. My script. Access denied. Back in the bar, I watched the app. 3:45 p.m. Flight 42 suddenly changed status from ON time to delayed. Then Flight 89 to Boston, DELAYD. Then Flight 112 to Seattle, DELAYD. "Here we go," I whispered, taking another shot. Inside the final approach, the air conditioning was humming a low, steady drone that usually comforted me. Today, it sounded like a countdown. My phone buzzed, then it buzzed again. Then it started vibrating continuously, dancing across the sticky bar top like a possessed beetle. I looked at the screen, Mike 3 missed calls, unknown number 2 missed calls, Blake boss 1 missed call. I didn't pick up, not yet. Old Nicole, the Nicole who slept with her phone under her pillow and had a panic attack if she missed a Slack notification, would have answered on the first ring. She would have been typing commands into a laptop before she even said hello. But that Nicole was currently decomposing in a landfill of corporate betrayal. New Nicole took a slow, deliberate sip of tequila and watched the lime pulp float in the glass. However, the ops lead part of my brain, the part that had been hardwired for catastrophe for a decade, wouldn't let me just sit there and rot. It started asking questions. Why now? Why fire me on a Friday afternoon before a storm front? Blake was incompetent, yes, and Courtney was delusional, but they were also greedy. Firing the most senior operational staff member right before a quarterly review didn't make sense from a stability standpoint. It was reckless even for them. Unless the goal wasn't stability. Unless the goal was the balance sheet. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I unlocked my phone, but I didn't open the airline app. I opened the browser and navigated to the state's Department of Labor website. I searched for WARN Act notices, the mandatory filings companies have to make before mass layoffs or closures. Nothing for Air Regional. Then I went to a financial news aggregate site. I searched for Air Regional Holdings. There it was. Buried in a subparagraph of a rumor column from 3 days ago, private equity firm Vista Capital rumored to be eyeing distressed regional carriers for asset acquisition. Sources suggest lean operations are a prerequisite for talks. Lean operations. The rage that flared up in my chest was so hot it almost made me sober. This wasn't just about synergy or vibe shifts. This wasn't just Courtney thinking I was a bummer. They were dressing the pig for market. They wanted to sell the airline to a chop-shop private equity firm that would strip it for parts, sell the slots at JFK and O'Hare, and fire everyone from the pilots to the janitors. They needed to show reduced overhead on the Q3 report. And my salary, my senior, accumulated over a decade's salary, was the overhead they decided to reduce. You absolute ghouls, I whispered. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness to a corporate murder-suicide, and I realized with crystal clarity that when the deal fell through, because you can't sell an airline that isn't flying, they would need a scapegoat. They wouldn't say, "We fired the architect." They would say, "The disgruntled employee sabotaged the system." I needed to protect myself. I needed to investigate not just the crash, but the crime scene. I texted a contact of mine, Chip. Chip worked in IT security for the airline. He was a good kid, quiet, the kind who wore noise-canceling headphones to avoid talking to people. He hadn't been fired because he was cheap and invisible. Me, Chip, don't reply on the company phone. Use your burner. Are they locking the server logs? 3 minutes passed. I watched a fly land on a pretzel. Chip, holy SHT Nicole, it's bad. Blake is screaming. They're trying to find your user directory. They think you deleted it. Me, I didn't delete it. The system purged it upon termination. Standard protocol. Are they logging the error codes? Chip, yes. The logs show dependency failure, user authorization missing. Blake is trying to get us to manually write a bypass, but we don't know the sequence. He's asking if we can remote wipe your laptop to find the codes. Me, do not touch my laptop, Chip. That's personal property now. Listen to me. Screenshot the error logs. Specifically the timestamps showing the system crash happened after my termination time. If you do this, I can help you later. If you don't, they're going to blame it for the failure. Chip, done. Sending to your private email now. Also, Henderson just pulled into the parking lot. He looks like he's going to kill someone. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a chess player who just watched their opponent move their queen into a trap. I had the compliance agreement, hard copy at home. Now I had the digital timestamps proving the system failed because of their administrative action, not my malice. I had the leverage. I ordered another drink. Sal, keep 'em coming. The show is just starting. At 4:15 p.m., the inevitable happened. The news on the TV above the bar cut away from a soap opera to a breaking news graphic. A helicopter shot showed the tarmac at JFK. It was a parking lot. Dozens of Air Regional jets were sitting nose to tail, blocking the taxiways. Gridlock at the gate. Regional carrier, SYSTMS collapse causes northeast delays. The ticker at the bottom scrolled, Air Regional halts all departures. FAA issues ground stop. Thousands stranded. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked up. "This is Nicole," I said, my voice calm, professional, contrasting sharply with the chaotic background noise on the other end of the line. I could hear shouting, phones ringing, and what sounded like a fire alarm chirping in the distance. "You crazy bee *TCH?" Blake's voice cracked. He sounded like a teenager whose parents just came home early to find a keg in the living room. "What did you do? Turn it back on. Right now." "Hello, Blake," I said, swirling my ice. "To whom am I speaking? I believe I was terminated for insubordination. I don't work for you." "Don't play games with me," he screamed. "The system is dead. It's asking for a level 5 authorization. It says, user unknown. You locked us out. That's corporate sabotage. I'll have the FBI at your door in an hour. I'll sue you for every penny you've ever made." "Blake, stop screaming and listen," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a razor. "I didn't lock you out. You locked yourself out. Do you remember the streamlining meeting? The one where you said we had too many redundant protocols?" "Fix it," he wailed. "I can't fix it, Blake. The Level 5 authorization is a security handshake between the legacy mainframe and the web server. It requires an active director-level user profile to authenticate the data packets. When you processed my termination at 3:00 p.m., the HR system sent a signal to the IT server to revoke my credentials. The server did exactly what it was designed to do. It purged the unauthorized user and all associated personal scripts. What? The shouting stopped. The silence was deafening. "You didn't just fire the driver, Blake," I continued, enjoying every syllable. "You revoked the car's registration while it was moving. The system isn't broken, it's secure. It's protecting the airline from an unauthorized user." "That's me. You made me unauthorized." "Then give me the code," he pleaded. "Just tell me the password." "There is no password," I said. "It's a biometric key linked to my employee ID, which is now invalid. To fix this, you don't need a password. You need to rebuild the entire routing logic from the ground up to bypass the authentication check. Or you need to reinstate the user." "Okay," he stammered. "Okay, fine, you're rehired. Come back, fix it." "No." "What do you mean no? I just rehired you." "I decline the offer," I said. "I'm enjoying my retirement. Besides, I wouldn't want to bring my negative energy back into your synergistic family. It might ruin the vibe." "Nicole, please." Courtney's voice suddenly came on the line. She must have been listening on speaker. She sounded terrified. The airy influencer confidence was gone, replaced by the shrill panic of someone realizing that Instagram likes can't fly airplanes. "People are tweeting. They're posting videos of the crowds. It looks really bad for the brand. Can't we just manifest a solution? We can brainstorm. We can collaborate." "Manifest a solution?" I laughed out loud. The sound startled Sal, who looked over at me with concern. "Courtney, you can't manifest a database query. You can't brainstorm a TCP/IP protocol. You broke the machine. Now you have to sit in the wreckage." "We'll pay you," Blake interrupted, his voice drop. Ping to a desperate whisper. "We'll pay you whatever you want. Double time, triple time, just come in and type the thing." "It's not about the money, Blake," I lied. It was a little bit about the money, but mostly it was about the principle. "It's about liability. If I touch that keyboard now after being fired, I accept responsibility for the crash. I become the owner of this disaster." And looking at the news, I glanced up at the TV, where a reporter was interviewing a woman crying because she was missing her father's funeral. This is a very expensive disaster. "I think I'll stay here and drink my tequila." "My father is here," Blake hissed. "He's coming upstairs. Nicole, if you don't help me, he's going to kill me." "Then I suggest you run," I said. "I hear Bali is nice this time of year." I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the words I had swallowed for years. I had held the line. I had spoken truth to power, and power had crumbled. But the victory was short-lived. A text from Mike popped up. "Mike, it's a slaughterhouse, Nick. The automated baggage system just went offline because it lost sync with the flight manifest. We have 4,000 bags piling up on the belts. The ramp guys are walking off the job. They can't handle the abuse from the passengers. I've never seen it this bad, not even during Sandy." I felt a pang of guilt. Mike was a good man. The ramp guys were good people. They were suffering because of Blake, but I was the one holding the cure. Was I being petty? Was I letting innocent people suffer just to prove a point? I took a deep breath. No, if I went back now, nothing would change. They would patch the hole, blame the glitch on legacy hardware, and fire me again in 6 months when the dust settled. The only way to fix this was to let it burn down to the foundation. By 6:00 p.m., the sun had set, and so had the airline's future. I had left the bar and moved to my war room, my living room couch. I had my laptop open, tethered to my phone's hotspot, because I was paranoid they might try to trace my home IP address. The narrative was shifting. The initial technical glitch story was falling apart. Passengers weren't just delayed, they were revolting. I found a live stream on Twitter. A guy with a heavy Brooklyn accent was filming the gate area at LaGuardia. "Nobody knows nuttin'?" He was yelling at the camera. "The screens are blank. The app says the flight is on time, but the plane ain't even here. The gate agent is crying in the bathroom. Where is the management? Air Regional, more like Air Regrettational." The hashtag Air Regional Meltdown was trending one in the United States. Then the official company email hit my personal inbox. It wasn't from Blake. It wasn't from HR. It was from the general counsel, the head lawyer. Subject, notice of legal action and demand for cooperation. "Ms. Vance, you are hereby notified that Air Regional Holdings considers your refusal to assist in the recovery of critical systems to be a breach of your fiduciary duty and a malicious act of interference with business operations. We are preparing a motion for an emergency injunction to compel your assistance. Furthermore, we are reviewing your employment history for evidence of intentional sabotage embedded in the code prior to your departure. We are prepared to file civil and criminal charges unless you report to HQ immediately." They were doubling down. They were trying to scare me into submission. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. They really didn't check the files, did they? I opened my scanner app. I took the compliance agreement for personal workflow tools document, the one signed by the previous VP of Ops in 2014, and I scanned it. I highlighted the paragraph. Clause 4, Section B. Upon termination of employment, all employee-created personal optimization tools and scripts residing on company servers shall be automatically purged to protect intellectual property and security. The company accepts full liability for any system dependencies on said personal tools. I drafted a reply. I didn't send it to the lawyer. I sent it to the lawyer, Blake, Courtney, Old Man Henderson's executive assistant, and, for good measure, the tips email address for the Wall Street Journal reporter who had written the article about the private equity rumors. To General Counsel CC, everyone subject. Ray, notice of legal action. Dear Counselor, please find attached the compliance agreement regarding personal software tools, signed and filed in 2014. As per company policy, my personal scripts were purged automatically upon my termination to comply with security protocols authorized by Blake Henderson, Chief Strategy Officer. Any suggestion of sabotage is libelous. The system failure is a direct result of management removing the key operator without verifying dependencies. I have logs, timestamped, showing the system was stable until 3:00 p.m., exactly when my access was revoked. If you file an injunction, I will countersue for wrongful termination and defamation, and I will release the full server logs to the FAA during the discovery phase. I imagine the FAA would be very interested to know that you were running a Tier 1 critical infrastructure system on unauthorized, personal code for 7 years to save money. Govern yourself accordingly, Nicole Vance. I hit send. It felt like dropping a bomb. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't the lawyer. It wasn't Blake. Caller ID, Henderson SR. The king himself. I stared at the phone. This was the moment. The escalation had reached the ceiling. Blake couldn't fix this. Courtney couldn't vibe her way out of this. The lawyers couldn't threaten their way out of this. I picked up. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said. "Nicole," his voice was gravelly, sounding older than I remembered. "It's a goddamn mess down here." "I've seen the news," I said. "It looks expensive." "Cut the crap," Henderson barked, though the fire in his voice was dim. "The kid screwed up. I know it. You know it. He thought he could run this place with an iPad and a smile. He's an idiot." "He's your son," I reminded him, "and you put him in charge." "I know," Henderson roared, the audio peaking on my phone. "And I'm paying for it. I've got the FAA threatening to pull our operating certificate. I've got Vista Capital pulling their offer. The deal is dead, Nicole. The whole damn company is dead in the water if the planes don't move by morning." "That sounds like a strategy problem," I said coldly. "Don't give me that," Henderson pleaded. "You built this place, Nicole, you and me, in the blizzard of 14. We slept under the desks. You love this airline." "I loved what it was," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I didn't love being treated like a janitor by a boy in a three-piece suit. I didn't love being fired because I didn't fit the aesthetic." "I'll fire him," Henderson said, the words hung there. "I'll fire Blake. Tonight, I'll fire the girl. I'll give you the VP title. I'll give you a 5-year contract. Just come back, please, fix the bridge." It was everything I had wanted 3 days ago. Validation, promotion, security, the head of the king on a platter. But as I sat there in my quiet living room, looking at the blinking cursor on my laptop, I realized something. If I went back, I would just be patching the leaks again. I would be enabling Henderson to go back to Florida while another, Blake, eventually took his place. The rot wasn't just in the code, it was in the DNA of the company. I looked at the scan of the compliance agreement. I looked at the text from Mike about the ramp guys walking off the job. "I can't do it, Nick," I said, using his first name for the first time in years. "What number?" Henderson asked. "Name the number." "It's not the number," I said. "The bridge is burned. You let them light the match. If I come back and fix it now, I'm just proving that the system was dependent on me, which opens me up to liability for the downtime. I'm not risking my pension and my reputation to save your inheritance." "You're going to let us sink," Henderson whispered, "over pride." "Not pride," I said. "Professionalism. I advised against the termination. My advice was ignored. The consequences are yours." "Nicole." "Good night, Mr. Henderson." I hung up. I walked to the window. I live under the flight path of the airport. Usually every 2 minutes I would hear the roar of a jet engine. Tonight, the sky was silent. The silence was heavy, eerie, and absolute. It was the sound of $1 billion evaporating. Then, my phone chimed with an email notification. It wasn't from Air Regional. Sender, David Chen, VP Operations, Transcontinental Airlines. Subject, lunch. Nicole saw the news. "Assuming the meltdown at AR is related to your availability, we've been trying to crack their routing efficiency for years. If you're free, I'd love to buy you lunch tomorrow. We don't have vibe shifts here, we just have planes." I stared at the email. Transcontinental, the rival, the big blue machine. They were corporate, yes, but they were competent. They respected the mechanics of the job. I typed a reply. "Steakhouse on 5th, noon, bring a contract." I closed my laptop. The investigation was over. The case was built. The enemy was defeated not by a sword, but by their own hubris. Now, all that was left was the finale. The Steakhouse on 5th is where aviation deals are made, broken, and mourned. It is a place of dark mahogany, leather booths that smell like old tobacco and money, and waiters who know exactly how dirty your martini should be based on the look in your eyes. I walked in at noon sharp. I was wearing my consulting blazer. A sharp, navy blue number I hadn't worn in 3 years because I was usually too busy putting out fires in a windbreaker. I felt different. IF. Felt lighter. The crushing weight of the Air Regional server room was gone, replaced by a strange, buzzing energy. David Chen was already seated at booth 4, the power booth. David is a legend in the industry. He's the VP of operations for Transcontinental, our biggest rival. He looks like a man who sleeps 8 hours a night and moisturizes, a stark contrast to the walking corpses that usually inhabited my office. "Nicole," David said, standing up and offering a hand. His grip was firm, dry. "You look remarkably well for a woman who just burned a corporation to the ground." "I didn't burn it, David," I said, sliding into the leather booth. "I just took my batteries out of the smoke detector. The fire was already there." David laughed, signaling the waiter. "I'll have the ribeye, rare, and for the lady." "The same," I said, "and a bottle of your best Cabernet. I'm celebrating." We spent the first 20 minutes discussing the technicalities of the meltdown. David was fascinated. He wasn't gloating, he was studying the autopsy. He wanted to know about the legacy overrides, the handshake protocols, the specific way the server logic collapsed when the user directory was purged. It was the most intellectual conversation I'd had in a decade. No buzzwords, no synergy. Just pure, unadulterated systems logic. "So," David said, leaning back as the wine arrived, "the rumor is they're losing 10 million a day. The stock is in freefall. They're canceling 80% of the roster for tomorrow. It's over, Nicole. Even if they fix the code today, the brand damage is terminal." "It's a shame," I said, swirling my glass. "Henderson built a good thing once." "Speaking of the devil," David said, his eyes narrowing as he looked past my shoulder toward the entrance. "Don't look now, but I think the circus just arrived." I turned. Standing at the host stand, looking like they had just wrestled a bear and lost, were Blake and Courtney. Blake's expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, his face a mask of frantic, sweaty desperation. Courtney was wearing huge sunglasses indoors, likely hiding eyes red from crying, and she was clutching her phone like a lifeline. Behind them, leaning heavily on his cane, was Old Man Henderson. The restaurant went silent. This was an industry hangout. Half the people in the room were airline executives, union reps, or regulators. Everyone knew who they were. Everyone knew what was happening. Blake scanned the room, his eyes wild. When he saw me, he didn't hesitate. He marched across the dining room floor, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of oysters. "You," Blake shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You're sitting here eating steak while my company burns." "Hello, Blake," I said, not standing up. "Hello, Courtney, Mr. Henderson." "This is collusion," Blake screamed, his voice cracking. He looked at David. "She's stealing our trade secrets. She's sabotaging us and selling the data to you. I'll have you both arrested." David Chen didn't even blink. He slowly cut a piece of his steak, chewed it, and swallowed. "Blake, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself, and you're interrupting my lunch." "I'm not sitting down," Blake yelled. He slammed his hands on our table, rattling the silverware. "She locked us out. She has the codes. She's holding us hostage." Courtney stepped forward, pulling down her sunglasses. Her makeup was smeared. "Nicole, please," she whined, her voice trembling. "Just be a girl's girl for a second. We're losing everything. The wedding venue canceled because the deposit check bounced. Just give us the password. We can manifest a healing moment here." "A healing moment?" I asked, my voice rising just enough to carry across the silent restaurant. "Courtney, on Friday you told me I was toxic because I prioritized safety over vibes. You told me I was a relic. You streamlined me." "We made a mistake," Blake interrupted. "Okay, we admit it. Is that what you want to hear? We screwed up, now fix it." "I can't fix it, Blake," I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the printed copy of the email I had sent to the general counsel. And I'm not sabotaging you. David, would you like to see the documentation proving that Air Regional's collapse was due to a streamlining initiative authorized by the Chief Strategy Officer? I slid the paper across the table to David. Blake lunged for it, but David was faster. He placed a heavy hand over the document. "Let's see," David read aloud, his voice calm and authoritative. Clause 4, automatic purge of personal workflow tools upon termination. Blake, did you fire your lead architect without checking for system dependencies? It was a pivot, Blake stammered. We were moving to the cloud. You moved to the ground, David corrected. You grounded your own fleet. This isn't sabotage, son. This is gross negligence. If I were on your board, I'd sue you. The room erupted in low murmurs. I saw few people holding up phones, recording. This was it, the public execution of Blake's ego. Old man Henderson stepped forward. He used his cane to push Blake aside. The old man looked tired, ancient, really. The fire that had built the airline was gone, extinguished by the realization of his own failure as a father. That's enough, Henderson said quietly. He looked at me, his eyes were watery. Nicole. Mr. Henderson, I said, softening my tone. You really aren't coming back, are you? He asked. Not for any amount of money. No, sir, I said. I can't work for people who don't respect the craft, and I can't fix a system that you allowed them to break. Henderson nodded slowly. He looked at David Chen. She's the best there is, David. You treat her right, you give her the pension I failed to secure for her. I intend to, David said. He looked at me. In fact, Nicole, I have a contract here, Director of Systems Integration, full autonomy, and a signing bonus that covers your lost severance and then some. He slid a contract across the table, right next to the evidence of Blake's failure. I picked up a pen. Wait, Courtney shrieked. You can't work for them, that's bad karma. It's just business, Courtney, I said. It's efficient. I signed the contract. Blake looked like he was going to vomit. He looked around the room, seeing the smirks, the phones recording, the judgment of his peers. He realized in that moment that his vibe shift had shifted him right out of the industry. Get out, David said to Blake, his voice hard, before I call security. Henderson grabbed Blake's arm. Come on, the old man muttered. Let's go, it's over. I watched them leave. Blake was sobbing into his hands. Courtney was frantically typing on her phone, probably announcing a social media detox. Henderson didn't look back. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted like victory, like rich, full-bodied, oak-aged justice. So, David said, raising his glass, when can you start? Monday, I said. I have a boat to buy first. The fallout was swift, brutal, and thoroughly televised. By Monday morning, Air Regional had canceled 90% of its flights for the fourth day in a row. The FAA suspended their operating certificate pending a full safety audit. The stock price hit 40 cents a share. On Wednesday, the announcement came. Air Regional was being acquired by a budget carrier known for charging passengers for water and legroom. They weren't buying the brand, they were buying the airport slots and the planes. The Air Regional name would cease to exist. Blake was fired by the board of directors before the ink was even dry on the sale. The last I heard, he was facing a shareholder lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. His spiritual sabbatical in Bali had turned into a permanent exile. Rumor has it he's trying to launch a cryptocurrency for mindful investors. It's currently worth zero. Courtney pivoted. She launched a podcast called Toxic Success, How I Survived the Corporate Patriarchy. In the first episode, she claimed she was the victim of a dark energy attack by a disgruntled employee. I listened to 10 minutes of it, laughed until I cried, and then reported it for misinformation. But the real ending, the one that mattered, happened 2 weeks later. I was at my new office at Transcontinental. It was a real office, with windows, ergonomic chairs, and coffee that didn't taste like battery acid. I was in the middle of rewriting the dispatch logic, clean, elegant code that hummed like a choir when the receptionist called. "Nicole, there's a package for you at the front desk. It was hand-delivered." I went downstairs. It was a small box. Inside was a bottle of the vintage whiskey Henderson used to drink, the really expensive stuff from the 70s, and a note. "Nick, you were right. I let the kids play with matches because I was too tired to watch the fire. I'm sorry. I should have protected the airline, and I should have protected you. You were the best mechanic I ever had. Fly safe." Hey. I sat there in the lobby, holding the heavy glass bottle. I felt a lump in my throat. I had hated Henderson for what he allowed to happen, but reading that note, the anger finally dissolved. He was just an old man who loved his son too much and his business too little. I forgave him. Not for him, but for me. You can't carry that kind of baggage on a new flight. It weighs you down. I took the bottle home. That weekend, I drove down to the marina. I had bought it, a 28-foot center console boat. It wasn't a yacht, but it was mine. Paid for with the signing bonus David gave me. I walked down the dock, the sea breeze tangling my hair, feeling the sun on my face. I painted the name on the stern myself in bold, black letters. THE Override. I cracked the seal on Henderson's whiskey and poured a small splash into the harbor water, a libation for the ghost of the career I had buried. I poured a glass for myself. I sat in the captain's chair and looked out at the horizon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the transcontinental server. System alert, routing efficiency at 99.8%. All flights on time. I smiled. I turned off the phone. I wasn't the invisible hand anymore. I wasn't the turd polisher or the glitch. I was the captain. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful thrum that vibrated in my chest. I throttled up, leaving the dock, the city, and the wreckage of the past in my wake. The water was rough, but that was okay. I know how to navigate the turbulence.